Welcome to Greg Heym's Crossing Line. I don't know if it's Crossing Line with Greg Heym or Greg Heym's Crossing Line. It says in the mug, Greg Heym's Crossing Line. But, it shouldn't be confused with any other Crossing the Line.
Crossing the Line with Greg Heym, I think, has a nice ring to it.
Okay. Whatever, as long as my name's in there somewhere.
Your name's in there, either way.
That's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to see your name in lights. When that
Do you want to put your
work,
name first, or do you want to put the name of the show first? Do you care more about the name on the back of the jersey or the name on the front of the jersey?
Well, if I'm playing for USA Hockey, the one on the front's a hell of a lot more important.
Okay.
Than the one. I've seen that movie a lot.
Okay.
It's
a great movie.
It is a great movie, and
we're talking about Miracle.
Story. We are talking about Miracle. The first movie they made, like right after it happened, Miracle on Ice, they had Carl Malden playing Herb Brooks, which wasn't the best casting, but Kurt Russell does a really good job as Herb Brooks. No, but I wanted my name in lights. Instead, it's on a mug. You got to settle for what you can get.
You got to start somewhere.
You get what you get, and you don't get upset. As we used to tell my son when he'd wait and see what his toy is in his Happy Meal. Although I did bribe one or two people behind counters at fast food places. Can you give me the one with the train in it? It works. You'd be surprised. We're here with Lone Daddy himself, Scott Nadler, who has a handle, as we used to say in CB days and Smoking the Bandit days. Still, no one's given me one yet. Get your ad guy working on it.
We got the team working on it.
All right, that's good. All right, we started the weekend. How was your weekend? You can't come in here and not be doing cool things on the weekend, because that's not what Scott Nadler does.
Do you want to know about Friday night? Do you want to know about Saturday night? Or do you want to know about Sunday night, Greg?
What was the coolest thing you did this weekend?
It was a really eventful weekend, I got to tell you.
Man, this guy with his weekends.
Yeah, I could tell you Friday night we had a dinner party, and as a prank, there was like 20 of us. At about 11:45 at night, we hired a mariachi band to come into our dinner party, and they were so good and so funny. And
Where
we got
was the dinner party?
A noise complaint.
Yeah, in your building?
Oh, my friend's probably going to be evicted, but I think it was worth it.
Okay.
So that was Friday. Saturday, I had some friends in town. We took a cruise around New York City on the East River. There was like a honky-tonk event. And there were bands playing. We wore cowboy hats. We did line dancing.
Now, where are the photos of you in a cowboy hat? Was it a Lone Daddy cowboy hat?
I have them. We can put them in the show notes.
Yeah, we can do that in the show notes.
I'm the lone cowboy now.
Oh, okay.
And then
the lone buckaroo or something.
And then I saw Arcade Fire last night.
Okay, how was that?
They were great.
Where was the show?
Brooklyn Paramount.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I was telling Lena, they played the first half of the show. They played their album that has not come out yet. And then the second half of the show, they played all their hits. So the first half was a little odd, but it was ended up being a great show.
I remember seeing the Wilco, the week Blue Sky came out, and they played like 8 songs from the album. And I was mad because I really love that album, but I wasn't enjoying the songs that much then. All right, that does sound much cooler than what I did on Saturday night. I saw a double bill, a Doors tribute band and a Led Zeppelin tribute band.
Okay.
The Doors tribute band was fantastic. The singer sounded just like Jim Morrison.
What band?
It was called Crystal Ship. You know them?
Been around forever.
Yeah, he looks
Obviously,
it.
he knows them.
These guys look
excited.
it. There's another really good one that plays the Huntington Paramount every year, Wild Child. They're really good. They tour nationally. Then the Zeppelin band was just okay. I'm not going to name names, but they were just okay. But I did see something on Monday that was really fantastic. I saw Britt Floyd at Paramount, and it's a 50th anniversary of Wish You Were Here. So part of the second set was just that entire album from start to finish.
Very cool.
They play a little too much of the post-Roger Waters stuff, which is okay, but, don't tease me by playing one song from Animals if you're not going to play the other 2 songs. It's just too good album.
Can we give a shout out to our boy, Jalen Brunson?
We can give a shout out to the Knicks for getting it done, making us sweat it, but getting it done.
It wasn't easy.
Well, now you get the Celtics. That's your reward. A team you haven't beaten all year. But you can say the same thing about Cleveland. So either way, you're gonna have to beat 2 teams you haven't beaten all year just to get to the finals, to probably play another team you haven't beaten all year in OKC.
Right.
Although, can you rule the Nuggets out? I don't know.
It'll be an exciting playoffs.
I mean,
it's been very exciting.
It's pretty exciting. And the NHL playoffs too. The Winnipeg game last night, there were 2 goals in the last 2 seconds left. They tie the game.
It's a good time.
Dallas came back and beat Colorado. Unbelievable playoffs. And the Yankees still in first place. And Aaron Judge is hitting like 420 something.
What could be better?
If he was hitting like 520. And the Yankees were beating Tampa Bay Anyhow, all right. Now we got everybody's weekend straight. You guys have good weekends, Ray and Lena? Lena's nodding, so we'll just okay. All right, well, that's good.
We did say it's National Strawberry Month, by the way.
I'm not a big fan of strawberries.
What's your favorite berry?
Blueberry. No, I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite berry.
You have a favorite berry? Everyone wants to know, Greg.
I don't say
This is what the message boards are asking.
I'm not a big berry guy. I like grapes.
What about, I was going to say, fruit?
My favorite fruit is an apple. I love a nice juicy apple. And the fiber is good, and it fills me up. It's good.
Okay.
Boring. I'm an economist. Hello. All right. Now, before we lose all the viewers, we're coming to you today from beautiful Studio 1873, and we'll be right back to start the real part of the show right after these great commercial messages starring somebody who I won't name names.
Your dream home is closer than you think. I'm Scott Nadler, VP of Mortgage Lending at CrossCountry Mortgage, and I'm here to get you the perfect loan to match your perfect home. From first-time home buyers to seasoned homeowners, I've helped clients make their moves with confidence. Ready for a smooth, stress-free home buying experience? Let's get you moving today. Call me and let's turn those dreams into keys.
And we're back. So, big week for economic data. When I was writing the blog,
news.
I'm like, this could be 10 pages, but that sounds more like a term paper than a column. So it was about GDP and jobs, right? And GDP came out first, and we found out the economy contracted, that it was negative. It wasn't as negative as the Atlanta Fed's GDP now, which was like 2 and change.
Right.
This was only 0.3%.
Which, by the way, impacted the bond market and in turn rates, because they were expecting it to be worse than what the actual numbers came out at.
Right.
So even though it was negative, it wasn't as negative as they anticipated.
Right. It's like a good, bad number.
Correct.
And that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Exactly.
like, whatever.
Well said.
So gross domestic product, to bring out the teacher in me, it's the value of all the goods and services produced in the U.S. The economists were looking for a slightly lower 0.2% as opposed to 0.3. It doesn't really matter. It's the first negative growth quarter in 3 years. Now, that may sound frightening. Oh, no, does that mean recession? Just remember a bunch of things. Number one, we don't judge recessions by negative GDP anymore. It used to be 2 negative quarters in a row, you have a recession. They threw that out years ago. Now a bunch of economists use the famous definition of I know it when I see it. It's like a marked downturn in employment.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, here's why you can't just slap a mathematic rule. So let's look at this number, right? Minus 0.3%.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's scary, right? It's like that's terrible. But remember the equation. C plus I plus G plus NX. C is consumption. What me and Scott buy? He buys arcade fire tickets. I'm going to see tribute bands. See how old I am? The actual bands aren't doing it anymore. Well, Morrison's been dead for like 50 years. So,
yeah.
So that's consumption. That's 70% of the GDP number. That was actually contributed 1.2% to the final number. Then we have business investment, which contributed a big amount, 3.6%. Government spending fell, ironically, 0.3%. Just a coincidence. At least that was the impact it had on the number. And then net exports, which subtracted almost 5% from the GDP number. So you add all those numbers up, 1.2, 3.6, negative 0.3, negative 4.8, and you get 0.3, negative 0.3%. Take out net exports, economic growth would have been 4.5% rate. That's a big difference, but that's not a fair comparison because then we have to take out the business investment because that had something to do with the rush. We knew net exports was going to be bad because we had record high imports pre-tariff, right? With Liberation Day looming, big rush to get the stuff in here.
Right.
So take that out and economic growth is just under 1%. Weak, but still positive. Now, did people buy more, particularly in March because they wanted to buy before tariffs? Yes. The PCE numbers came out. March was up 0.7%, I think it was, for the month, which is a strong number.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to see what this means going forward. Again, once tariff mania, copyright Greg Heym Enterprises, goes away, things will calm down, and I think numbers will go back to more normal levels. But what are your thoughts on this? You hear the GDP number, like me, you're probably like, oh, that's not so bad.
I agree that it's not so bad, but we are seeing weakness in the economy. So, and I know we're going to have some back and forth on this, and I think it's an indication of where things are. Now, we used to define what a recession is by data. Now
Right.
it seems like you're looking at it more on how do we feel?
And you do it
How do we
like
feel about
6
it?
months after the fact. You look
Correct.
back and go, yeah, that was a recession.
Right.
Sometimes you know it, like you knew what happened after COVID. The economy shut down. Of course you have a recession. Lehman Brothers, the world's ending. Banks are going out of business. Like, okay, that's a recession.
But they also looked at it differently then. They also used an exact number. We're saying if we have negative growth
well, they
for two
didn't during
consecutive quarters.
COVID.
During COVID, they changed it.
This predates COVID. The change in measuring GDP.
I thought they conveniently changed it during COVID.
No,
No?
I don't think so. But you keep talking.
could edit
because
that out,
I'm gonna look it up. I know we admit when we don't know, but keep going. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we look at the jobs report, let's say, I know we're going to get into that. The jobs report came in, the BLS jobs report came in higher than expectations. By the way, I feel like they should lose the L in BLS because these numbers are not real. And that's indicative based on the revisions that we're seeing every month.
Right.
January, February, March, they revised the numbers by negative 124,000. Last year, what happened? We talked about this repeatedly on this show, how the BLS overstated jobs by over 800,000 jobs that just came out of nowhere.
That's not a rounding error? No, I'm just kidding.
So, I feel like in my space, in the mortgage space, the table was set to see, I don't want to say a significant drop in rates, but I would say leaning more towards that trend where you were going to see rates start to drop a little bit more. If the jobs report came in more in line or lower than expectations, and then it comes in higher, and all of a sudden you see the bond market go up, and you see rates start to tick up a bit. This is like, we were just talking about the Knicks before. This is like watching a basketball game and not keeping score. And then a month later saying, you know what, we added up all the baskets and it turns out the Knicks won the game. And initially we thought Detroit won because that's kind of what we felt.
Right.
And when they keep revising, for March even, they did their first revision and they revised it lower by 43,000 jobs. They're going to revise it again. It'll probably be another 20,000 or so. And they're probably going to revise this one also. So and then if
so
you
that means
compare
we shouldn't just go into the report.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it.
No,
If you compare it to ADP though, so ADP comes in 2 days
ADP
earlier.
Never matches. The BLS's 2 surveys don't match. The payroll and the household surveys never match. You throw ADP into it, and you have 3 numbers that could all be moving. Well, they can only move in one of 2 directions, so they can't all be in different directions. But the magnitude of the change. I guess when they're all positive, that's good, and when they're all negative, that's bad. Outside of that, I don't know what you can.
Which report though is moving the market more?
Well, the payroll number is what is the begin all
100%.
End all of everything, but the payroll number also double counts people. It doesn't care if the jobs are part-time or full-time. There are reasons, but again, it is by far the largest. It's twice the size of the household survey. So
the disparity though is so great, right? Like if
they're
you
being
look at
collected 2 different ways, by 2 different agencies basically, and they're asking different questions, and that's the thing. The household survey, if you could get the same number of responses, I think would be the preferred one because we're only counting everybody once. We're getting better data. On these people, how many are working part-time, how many are working multiple jobs. Payroll survey doesn't care. The
birth death model showed what? According to BLS, it was 393,000 new businesses created, and then ADP showed 11,000. It was just
ADP. I obviously they're the largest payroll company, but they're not doing everybody.
Right.
When do startups start using ADP? I don't know. It's a good question. All right, so since we've already gotten into this a little bit, Greg Heym, the great reporter, economics writer for the Wall Street Journal, had an article after GDP came out saying
He's been great.
And we talked about him and how he was pointing out that it all seems like the world's ending, but if you look at economic data, it's not showing up in the hard data. So the title of his article is "Forget GDP, it's the jobs report that matters." And his argument is the jobs report, that data was collected after Liberation Day, as I guess we're going to call it forever. And he was right. And then we get a blowaway number, 177,000 jobs in April, much higher than the 133,000 that were forecast, and higher than the 152,000 job average of the past 12 months. So higher than expected, higher than trend. It all sounds good. The unemployment rate was unchanged, but the labor force went up a little bit, which is good. That's usually an encouraging sign. Wages rose a little less than expected, but still rising faster than prices. We'll get CPI later this month, and then we can be a little more accurate about that. The other thing about this is, well, what does federal employment look like? Well, we don't know because, and this is the BLS's exact language, employees on paid leave or receiving ongoing severance are counted as employment. So as long as they're getting paid regularly, and we know that they were getting large severance packages to leave, they're not unemployed. But the real takeaway here is the private sector is still hiring people, and at a pretty good clip. Now, we wouldn't have expected this because of data that came out earlier in the week. And this is what upsets me. And I'm going to label this as misinformation. Are we going to get in trouble for that? Am I allowed to label stuff as misinformation?
Label away.
Okay. Lena's giving me the
permission?
okay. Hopefully that came through on the microphone. So, so the JOLTS report came out, which gives us a number of job openings in terms of, and a lot of other stuff. Let's just ignore that for a minute. This report's only been around for 20 years-ish, 25 years maybe. So the number of job openings fell from 7.48 million to 7.19. So they say, that they're talking about the U.S. job openings dropped sharply in March. That's a 3% decline. Dropped sharply. It's like, okay, you can't cheer it enough, right? Because what sells papers? Nobody buys papers anymore, but what gets views? This stuff.
Bad news.
So a little clarity on that. In the 20 years before the pandemic that the JOLTS report was done, the average number of job openings, 4.5 million. So this number that is way higher than it's been goes down by 3% and it's plunged. That's it. Okay, fine. We'll see. And remember, this is as of the end of March. So this is before Liberation Day. So that upset me because, I think that's being a little disingenuous. But again, maybe they're just doing it for a headline. Here's another headline about another bit of data that came out the day before the jobs report. Weekly jobless claims surged to 241,000, more than expected in latest sign of economic trouble. Where's the data showing economic trouble that's not the soft consumer confidence, consumer sentiment data? What, stock prices? We'll get into that in a minute. But the average initial claims for unemployment in data that goes back to 1967 is 362,000. So why are we trying to scare people here, Scott Nadler? Why?
Can I zag?
No. Are we allowed zagging? Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Can I zag from what
You're loan
we were
daddy.
just
You
talking
can do
about?
whatever you want to do.
Nothing you said there is wrong.
Yes.
I would look at there's some additional data there as well. For example, the average unemployment duration
Right.
is now 23 and a half weeks, which is the longest it's been in 5 months. So from that end of it, people are unemployed for a longer amount of time.
Right.
Not great. The second point of data that I would point to is the ratio of job vacancies to unemployed people. In 2022, it was 2 to 1. There were 2 jobs for every unemployed person. Now it's 1 to 1. That's not
But that's
great
more normal,
trend.
though. But that's
okay.
It's mean reversion. We're going back to, like, people used to quit jobs and have a new job by lunchtime, because the job openings at one point they were close to 3 jobs for every person looking, and that's something that both layoffs are not rising with any significance. Weekly claims for unemployment, you can't go by 1 week. First of all, that's not even really official data. Most of that surge was in New York, which may have had something to do with a recess for some workers. But outside of that, you can't just sit and point at 1 week of data and say, well, this is surging, another sign of economic trouble.
Right. If the quit rate, though, is low, which we've talked about here as well, it's not a great sign.
But it's still, compared to pre-COVID data, it's not bad. Like, when we're not in this time where people can't find jobs or they're spending a year on unemployment. I think, plus we never know how much severance people get, things like that. But it's going back to a more normal period. We're not in this terrible dire straits. We're not in a recession.
Yeah.
Any way you want to define it, it's not happening yet.
Listen, I can't just zig with you every time. I got to zag every so often.
If you want to play devil's advocate, that's okay. Somebody's got to be the bad guy.
I don't mind.
That's good, because economists already have a bad reputation. I want to be the happy mean guy, something like that. I don't know.
You're
All
playing
right.
the part well.
Before we get on with more back and forth, let's take another break for some important messages.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. As an official moving partner of Brown Harris Stevens, we know that your clients deserve more than just a move. At Roadway Moving and Storage, we turn moving into an experience they will love. From specialized services to a white glove treatment, we've got it all covered. When you choose Roadway, you're choosing a peace of mind for your clients. Plus, our referral program is the most rewarding in the industry. Want to learn more? Shoot me an email at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
All right, and we're back. So we talk about, soft data, consumer confidence, consumer sentiment, stuff like that. And people say,
meaning opinions and feelings.
Right.
Of people.
Like, I'm not going to buy stuff, or
Right.
This is terrible. I don't agree with what's happening and
Right.
all that stuff. But people might say, well, what about the stock market? Like, that's sort of hard data, even though it's usually based on what people think of the future. And obviously, a lot had been made about the administration's first 100 days and how the performance of the stock market was its worst since Nixon. Okay, that sounds scary. But let's see what's happened recently. Friday marked 9 straight days the S&P 500 was up.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't happened in 20 years. Scott Nadler was in elementary school, I think, when that happened the last time.
Not quite, but not so far.
He was lone baby, not lone daddy. Yeah, exactly.
A lone child.
That's exactly. So some other things that show a level of optimism. I always say the stock market is a great mood indicator. The S&P 500 has recovered all its losses since Liberation Day. And now it is down just 3.3% for the year. Anybody else said that? I mean, why is that not bigger news? To me, that sounds like big news, Scott. Now, what do you think, unless you want to zag again? I don't know.
No, there's nothing to zag there. This is something that I talked about also once before. Look, we have a polarizing administration. I think when you have, like what you were saying before, if it bleeds, it leads. Yeah. And it's easy to talk about the negative side of things, and it's been such a burst of news that is happening. I mean, things are happening in the first 100 days. There are so many things that are happening. It's hard to keep track, and you can always you can always cherry pick different things based on what you're seeing. But if you do what you're doing here, and you take a step back and you take a bird's eye view of everything that's happened from, let's take it either from January 20th when things got started or April 2nd, you're right. You're not seeing such drastic changes in the economy, in the data that was forecasted.
Well, in fairness, there hasn't been this. employment report is the first real
Since Liberation Day, for sure.
Since Liberation Day, the hard data that we have, and it's good.
Right.
Is it going to stay that way? I don't know, but
I feel like you're an angry optimist today.
no. But I think like I was reading another article,
which I respect.
Today
That
about
could
how
be your name, by the way, the angry optimist.
Okay, I could see that. But by definition, economists aren't optimists. We're the one who spoils. We're the Debbie Downers. You know.
But you're crossing the line too.
Yes, I'm crossing. That's correct. Ding, ding. We have a bell every time we work that in. I know. We spent all the money on bobbleheads and loan daddy hats. We got to work. And mugs. We're in trouble. You know, some small businesses now in the U.S. are actually finding that they've never been busier because of people turning for certain things to buy American because there's no tariffs on American-made goods. So there are two sides to every story. Obviously, the negotiations are still ongoing. We're waiting to hear about some deals being done because eventually there won't be enough time. There's too many countries out there. But another piece of good news that we got, so we got the GDP number again, ignore that. Consumers still are spending. And the job growth was good. Maybe it gets revised downward. We'll see. They hope nobody notices. That's why they revise it.
I would bet you that it probably will.
We'll see what happens. Come watch us again in a month and we'll see.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is, so with all the GDP data come out, it kind of slipped past some people probably that the PCE data came out too for the quarter and for March.
Which was good.
So the core PCE, that's personal consumption expenditures, price index, year over year was up 2.6%. That's down from 3% in February and the lowest annual gain since September. So
closer to that Fed's target of 2%.
Which they're not going to get to till 2027, which is when their ridiculous new headquarters
Mark
will
it
be
on your calendar.
refurbished. We're going to have a road trip.
2027.
We're all going to go. Scott's going to drive. We're going to go down to D.C. and check out the Fed's refurnished.
Crossing the line on the road.
On the road, protest signs the whole way there, yelling at them for spending money so they can have private elevators to go to their private dining rooms. We don't even get takeout here.
Reminds me of that Mitch Hedberg joke where he says he's against protesting. He's just not sure how to show it.
It sounds like he borrowed that from Stephen Wright.
Oh, yeah?
Who famously said, I'd kill for a Nobel Peace Prize. Anyhow. So, obviously, inflation is deflation right now. Disinflation, not deflation, but disinflation. The rate is going down. But that isn't stopping economists from trying to scare the you-know-what out of people by saying, well, tariffs are going to cause inflation. I don't know what schools these economists went to, but they weren't the right schools. Mm-hmm. Greg only has a certain amount of money to spend. That's it. I don't get to
going in the third person now. I like it. Unless you're talking about your son.
Well, no. Greg Jr. only has the money I give him to spend. But, if you're printing money like you did during COVID, that causes inflation. Mm-hmm. Too much money chasing not enough goods. This is the case of the same money chasing the same goods, but certain number of those goods will be more expensive, potentially. We don't know how much. If there's an alternative place to get it, whatever. It's not going to cause, first of all, we already have inflation. It's still a problem. So you can't point to the tariffs and saying we had low prices until that happened. But you got to remember, if I have the same amount of money and I'm spending more on bobbleheads, I can't buy loan daddy hats. So the price of loan daddy hats is going to go down.
Right.
Because there's going to be surplus.
Right.
Now we don't have enough loan daddy hats to go around because we love them so much. We want to have everybody
selling so
wear
fast.
One. So that's good news.
If you're the Fed, though, we've been hearing them talk about two things: inflation and the labor market.
Well, those are their two mandates.
And their policy, depending on what they do, is going to impact one versus the other. So now you're seeing inflation starting to come down a little bit. You're seeing a robust jobs number.
Yes.
So if the Fed
Can
wasn't...
they do two things at once?
I was going to say, if the Fed wasn't confused before, I wonder what they're thinking now. And they do have meetings this week.
Right. Nobody expects anything.
Nothing's
this
going to
week.
happen. But this is not what they would have anticipated.
Well, you got Jerome Powell saying publicly that we can't do anything till we know what these tariffs
Correct.
are, which I'm not buying it. Sorry. But
the hard data that you're seeing here is probably better than what they would have expected.
right. And I think that they'll take that into consideration. So there was Bloomberg had a survey of economists came out today. They're looking for 2 cuts this year starting in September. If you look at the markets and what they're looking for in July as getting a cut there and 3 rate cuts for the year. So that's kind of 25 basis points more.
Meaning the market is more
betting on it.
concerned
Yeah.
about what? Are they more concerned about the
Well,
labor market?
are they doing it
or are they more
because-
concerned about inflation running?
I think that the market is a lot of it. If you look at stocks in the recovery the last almost 2 weeks, they're shrugging off recession fears. They do not seem very worried about it. A lot of companies have beat earnings by a lot in the first quarter. That helps. So I think in that case, you wouldn't be expecting as many rate cuts.
Correct.
But with a lower than expected sort of inflation number, there's probably room for them to cut a little bit. But what difference is that going to matter now? We had a full percentage of cuts last year. Let them do their job, and maybe they will. If they wait till September, that should be enough time to say, okay, we should know if we're getting a benefit from that.
In a way, I feel like it contributes to the overall sentiment. It goes back to that soft data versus hard data. Soft data being opinions and feelings. And if you lower it by 0.25%, is it really going to do much? Probably not. But what does that signal to the business community?
Well, they've all been told that the rates have to be cut. Even in real estate where mortgage rates are concerned, which aren't directly tied to what the Fed does with overnight rates, people just say, I want the Fed's got to cut mortgage rates.
Correct.
Well, they don't control mortgage rates.
Right.
So they can't do that. And they want to hear rate cuts, right? Because to them, who cares about inflation now? But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, tariffs are going to cause inflation. Well, we can't have that on top of what we already have. That's going to be bad. Some people are expecting the PCE to grow at a 4% annual rate of increase in the second half of this year due to the tariffs. How do you know that? We don't even know what the tariffs are going to be. We know that they're not going to be what was levied on Liberation Day. That was the starting point. So I think, again, when economists want to model everything, they need to think about what they're doing to the consumers out there that are hearing guesses in a lot of cases. And again, we got consumer confidence, which fell to its lowest level in almost 5 years. That's scary enough. But then they have something called the expectations index, which is like, what is Scott thinking about the next 6 months? That fell to its lowest level since October of 2011. So again, that's your soft data. That sounds scary. Now, soft data can become hard data if people stop spending because they're told a recession's coming and their savings have dwindled.
October of 2011, by the way, right on the heels of the great financial crisis, you have the mortgage crisis. Unemployment back then in October of 2011 was like 9.5%. So it was a different time, but now we're living in a world where, again, everyone has a voice, and voices are very, very loud. So to compare today's economy to the economy of October 2011 is not fair.
Right. Because even though the worst of the financial crisis was over, there was still, a lot of banks had very low stock prices. That still scared people. It was hard to think we're out of the woods.
And those who liquidated everything in October of 2011, the S&P is up 5x from 2011 to now. So, I think that those are important things to consider as well. Well, you don't want to be prisoners of the moment. We do want to wait and see what a lot of these policies are ultimately going to do. And again, you made a great point as far as look at what, with all the noise, with every single thing that's happening. We've talked about it before, where every Uber driver that I talk to knows something about tariffs, has an opinion about tariffs. Everyone has a voice. Everyone knows something. With all that being said, the market's down 3.3%. Right. So, I think it's important to take a beat and
we got to check if Cookie Monster's been tweeting about tariffs, because remember, he tweeted about shrinkflation. So maybe he know like tariffs either. I'm not doing my Cookie Monster
Pull it
impression. I got in a lot of trouble with my nieces and nephews saying it sounded too scary. Cookie Monster's supposed to be happy, even though he's addicted to cookies, which sure that's normal.
He's still a monster.
It's still a monster, exactly. He's still scary.
Yeah.
Anyhow, all right, we got one more break, and then we'll be back to finish the show with some happy news.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
All right, and we're back finally. So we always like to mention housing, and we got some really good news on housing. Pending home sales up 6.1% in March. Why does the data lag so much? I don't know, but just keep in mind that this is based on contracts signed, not closings. So these will be closing considerably, most of it in April into May. That's typically when that happens. Here in New York, it could take 3 to 6 months to close. A lot of it with co-op boards, but in most places it's a month or two. That was the biggest increase since December of 23. So that's good news, right?
We saw rates stabilize that month, So we didn't see the volatility that we were seeing in the previous months, and I think that contributed to
And they
these numbers
even
here.
drifted a little bit lower in February.
Correct.
Which would have been quick to get a contract signed, but that happens.
It doesn't take a significant drop to see activity start to pick up.
No, I think people look for any downturn and say, yeah, if we wait,
Now's an
this will
opportunity.
be up.
Yep.
So that's good news. And mortgage rates down for the second straight week. That's good
That data came out before the jobs number.
Yes,
So
which-
things started to change, but yeah, again, I think from a bird's eye view, you're seeing things start to trend in the right direction, but it's been a little.
But it's that
volatile.
range, 6.6 to 6.8. Like that's where it's sort of been stuck
Correct.
for a while. So it's too early to say what the jobs report is doing, but how's activity in mortgages lately? What are you seeing?
This is the season. Activity has definitely picked up. I think overall things are taking longer. So it's taking time for contracts to get signed. It's taking longer to get documentation that we need for a building, a co-op, or a condo. That's kind of the bane of the real estate world existence right now, getting buildings approved, where they need to adhere to all these new guidelines with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in light of the Surfside building collapse in Miami a couple of years ago.
Right.
But in terms of activity, there's definite activity.
Well, there's a lot more inventory. We covered that last week when we were talking about existing home sales. So, but it hasn't translated into lower prices yet, which explains why existing home sales are not doing well. Whereas new home sales, where they have cut prices dramatically because they have twice the supply levels, has seen a big uptick in activity.
Right.
So what is your advice again? So you have stability in rates.
More or less.
At this point, are you just telling people, look, let's see what the payment is, and if you see something you like, jump on it, because there's still low inventory in so many parts of the country right now.
Absolutely. And we're talking to clients up front about what the refinance process is like in the event that rates do drop. But also, once you lock in a rate, there are many float down opportunities.
There are a lot, it seems.
So up front, all right, if I lock in a rate of 6.7%, that's my ceiling. So that's the highest rate that I'm going to have. In the event that rates drop between the day that I sign a contract and go to closing, I could potentially lower that rate even further.
Right.
We don't see that rates are really impacting the people that want to buy are buying. And if, let's say, New York is unique because you could be in one area of the city, you could be in more of a buyer's market, another area you could be more of a seller's market. But assuming that you're in a buyer's market where you have leverage, you can negotiate where you get a seller credit to buy down that interest rate. You have a little bit more power. So we work with a lot of agents and a lot of buyers with how to negotiate or structure their offer to not pay today's rates, to lower that rate.
No, it's good. And you know, we had a big meeting I spoke at here about a week ago. And I keep reminding people that if your buyers are nervous, think about your sellers that are on the market. They're out there for everybody to see that you know, the clock is running on time in the market, unless it's on a private network and then people can't see it. But, you know, that offers negotiability. Again, it seems like now things have calmed down a bit in terms of the stock market is kind of gotten back to where it was before these new tariffs hit. And the payroll number had to at least calm people down a little bit. They're still angry about tariffs, probably because they have to hear about it all day long. But this is the chance. If you wait till things calm down, you're just not going to get the same deal, I think, anyway.
And this is where you see the great agents, and many of which I work with in this office, really shine. Because again, like there's so many real estate agents out there, but many of them should not be in the business. Then you have a core group of people, again, many in this office, who can really separate themselves from the competition out there because they know how to communicate to buyers and sellers, identifying the market, identifying the price point, and advising them how to really win in this kind of market.
Yeah, we always tell the agents that your job doesn't change. Somebody has needs, you find homes that fit the needs and you lay out the opportunity.
The strategy changes.
That it becomes harder based on, okay, the rates are higher. What does that mean? Do we have to look at a different price point? Do we have to talk to Scott Nadler and find out what the options are? Like that part of it has changed, but the overall responsibility doesn't change.
Correct.
Same thing with you.
Correct.
You have to find a product that meets your client's needs as well.
Correct.
A lot of times that's an easy decision. Hey, go for the 30-year. The rate's low. It's good to lock in that long.
I wish I could control rates, and if I did, we'd be doing this show on my yacht right now. But unfortunately,
See, now I'm thinking of those mortgage guys in The Big Short. the guy's got it talks about how big his boat is. And
before I got into the business.
Yeah, well, you were still in high school at the time. What did you know?
Not quite, but.
Okay, well, I was still old and working here. Actually, my son was born in August of 2007. So for a while,
I'm an August baby too.
I was referring to him as financial crisis. Like that. That's all I could think of.
Not the great financial crisis, just.
Well, no, because I wasn't going to be that cruel to him.
Yeah.
Of course, he doesn't remember any of this, but I would try to stay up late reading all I could, and then I would doze off at random times during the day. He was mostly a good baby. Now, he's getting ready to shuffle off to Buffalo in a couple months. So now an update on my son.
How do you feel about that?
I'm very happy. It's a great business school, one of the top business schools in the country. That's great. My niece lives less than 10 minutes away from the Buffalo campus, so he has family close by. Her and her husband are right near the Bills Stadium. She works, actually. She works in Orchard Park as a teacher. My brother's only about an hour away from the thing, and he's a plane ride away.
When he's at a frat party, do you plan on stopping in and checking in on him?
Well,
and partaking in some of the. Just making sure that he has an adult figure around.
It reminds me of a Family Guy episode where they go to stop this party, the parents, and the cops stop them and go, "Aren't you a little old to be underage drinking?" It's like, since I didn't go away to school, I'm not an expert on keggers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think you could figure it out.
I know one or two things about drinking, and it's funny that he's only 17, but you have these conversations about it.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to be the cool dad that says, no, invite your friends over. It's better you do it here than somewhere else. No, I don't want to lose the house that you're drinking in because I let one of these kids,
How do those conversations go?
I've always had a very open way of approaching this because, being one of four brothers, I never had these conversations with my dad. He was always working multiple jobs. And my mother wasn't going to have any of it. She just don't do anything and you'll be fine. Mm-hmm. With only having one child, I am. My wife's like, you got to talk to him about this. You got to talk to him about that. I'm a little too frank with him, and he's like, no. I'm like, no. You got to know these things.
Yeah.
And you got to know that we know you're going to do things you shouldn't do. You're going to make mistakes. You're human. There's just some mistakes you can never make, and a lot of them revolve around stuff like drinking. Like if I find out you've been in the car with someone driving who's been drinking. if you ever have even a sip of anything while you're drinking, the punishments will be the worst you could ever imagine.
So it sounds like you give him the hard data, not the soft data.
No, I was a 17-year-old kid once. I'm not going to be the hypocrite, although that is part of the job description of a parent, is to be a hypocrite and claim you never did any of those things you did. But I don't want him to think that he can never, he can't come to me about something.
Right.
I've always said from the beginning, our job is to help you.
Yeah.
And we're there for you. And we're going to understand any mistake you've made, I probably made myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the goal for me is don't try to get him not to repeat all of my mistakes, but also just don't repeat your own mistakes too. That's the thing. Anybody can screw up once about something, but don't make the same mistake twice.
Next episode, we should outline all of your mistakes. Maybe we make it a 2-part episode.
We'll bring in all my ex-girlfriends and some of my teachers. And my mother will do it remotely. She's got a lot to say on the subject. But anyhow, well, that's it for the show this week. Exciting week. I wasn't as grumpy as I thought I was going to be.
No, again, I think an angry optimist is kind of who you are.
Well, look, there's reasons to be optimistic. The Knicks are in the conference semifinals. The Yankees are in first place. And
His hair looks great.
It looks great. Sorry for those of you listening, but if you're on YouTube, you see me bobbling his head right now. But in ESPN's preseason poll, after all the transfer portal stuff, number 3.
Exciting.
So I have
Very
a bet
exciting.
with my uncle, who's my godfather. He's also a St. John's grad, but he had 2 of his 2 sons went to Villanova. So now he's all about Nova. Plus, they won back-to-back championships.
Yeah.
So now I have a bet with him that St.
was like a
John's will
decade
better.
ago.
I know. Jalen Brunson
That
won
is
those championships
old
for
news.
him. So I said, he's like, well, we have better coaching. I said, there's never been a better coach in college basketball. And Rick Pitino has the best hair. He wore a white suit when they clinched the Big East regular season title. You can't beat that.
Might not be a better bobblehead either.
Well, thanks to Scott Nadler and thanks to Ray and Lena for helping us out with the show. And thanks to all you listeners and viewers. We really do appreciate it. Any comments, as always, you can send them to ctl@bhsusa.com. And I know I'm a little early, but we won't have another show until afterwards. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And to my mother, I love you, Mom. You're a great mother. Sometimes a little cranky, but you're still a great mother. And everybody have a great week. See you next week.